I never imagined my life could change in a single heartbeat. Lagos was alive as always. Horns screaming, street vendors shouting, exhaust smoke curling around the corners of the streets, mingling with the smell of roasted plantains and fried yam. Tund held my hand tightly, his small fingers digging into mine, and I felt the familiar squeeze of responsibility pressing down on me. Every day, I navigated this city like a tightrope walker. Careful, cautious, always aware of the dangers around me. I had been a widow for almost 3 years, and in those 3 years, life had taught me lessons I didn't want to learn. My husband, Chaik, had died suddenly. Heart attack, they said. Just like that, the man who promised to protect me, who promised to share my burdens, was gone, leaving me with Tund and a pile of bills I couldn't begin to manage. I had learned to stretch naira, to bargain with street vendors, to stay awake all night thinking about rent, groceries, school fees, and how to keep Tund fed and clothed. I had learned to smile when I wanted to scream, to nod when I wanted to shout. Lagos didn't care if you were a widow with a child. It moved too fast, too loud, too alive for anyone to notice. That evening, the streets were particularly chaotic. Rain had started earlier in the day, leaving puddles in uneven patterns along the asphalt. The sidewalks were slick, forcing people to weave around them or risk falling. I had Tund's school backpack slung over my shoulder, and mine was heavier than usual with groceries from the market. I had planned to make dinner for the week, something simple, something edible, something that would stretch. We were late. I glanced at my watch. 7:15. Tund's eyes were bright, innocent, unaware of the precariousness of our lives. He jabbered about school, about a drawing he had made for his teacher, about how he wanted to be an engineer when he grew up. His words tumbled over each other, excited, chaotic, pure. I smiled at him, despite my exhaustion. He deserved my smiles more than anyone, even if I had to borrow them from a place deep inside myself. We reached the intersection at Alausa Road. Cars honked as they sped past, riders on motorcycles weaved dangerously close to pedestrians, and the rain made the asphalt shine like liquid glass. I squeezed Tund's hand and checked for traffic before stepping off the curb. My focus split between holding his small hand and maneuvering around the puddles. Then the screeching started. Tires skidding. A horn blaring, long and sharp. My stomach dropped. A car was hurtling toward us. Too fast, too close. I froze, my mind blank. A strong voice cut through the chaos. Move! Before I could react, strong arms wrapped around me, yanking me and Tund out of the path. My feet left the ground for a heartbeat, and then we landed on the wet asphalt, hearts pounding, breaths ragged. The car zoomed past, missing us by inches. My knees hit the ground, my palms scraped against the wet road. Tund's small body was pressed against mine, trembling. I looked up and saw him. The man who had saved us. Tall, broad-shouldered. His suit soaked, hair damp from the drizzle, eyes sharp and penetrating. He exuded a calm confidence, almost unnerving in the chaos of Lagos traffic. Are you okay? I stammered, still on the ground, heart racing. He offered me a hand, strong, steady. You will be. My name is Gabriel. His voice was smooth, confident, commanding, and yet there was something in it that made me feel safe. A rarity in a city that thrived on danger and unpredictability. I took his hand, feeling the warmth of his grip, and for a moment, I wondered if the world could be different, if someone could truly look out for me. Thank you, I whispered, my voice hoarse from fear and relief. No need, he said, brushing a lock of wet hair from my face. Just be careful. I nodded, trying to regain composure. Tund hid behind my leg, peeking up at this stranger with wide eyes. I smiled at him nervously, and he reached out to touch Gabriel's sleeve. You saved us, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know how to thank you. Gabriel bent down slightly, making eye contact with Tund. You don't need to thank me, he said. Just look out for each other. Then he handed me a small card. His fingers were deliberate, controlled, as if every movement was calculated. On it, in sleek black letters, was his name and number. "Call me if you ever need help," he said, his eyes lingering on mine just a moment too long, and then he turned and walked into the rainy street, disappearing into the crowd. I stared at the card long after he was gone. Tund tugged at my hand. "Mommy, can we go home now?" I nodded, swallowing hard. My mind was spinning. Why would someone like him care about a widow and her child in Lagos? Someone wealthy enough to own cars, buildings, maybe even half the city? I shook my head and tried to focus on Tund, on getting him home safely. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. The screech of the car, the feel of Gabriel's hands, the way he looked at me. I couldn't understand it. Why did he feel familiar and foreign at the same time? Tund slept beside me, small chest rising and falling, oblivious to the thoughts that kept me awake. I traced his hair with my fingers, trying to memorize every detail, every strand. He was all I had now, my anchor in a city that could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. I thought about my husband, about the promises made, about the life I had envisioned before tragedy tore it apart. And then I thought about Gabriel, a stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, who had saved us without hesitation. I didn't trust him, not fully. Yet a part of me wanted to. Over the next few days, I found myself thinking of him constantly. Every time Tund went to school, every time I stepped out into the chaotic streets, I imagined him watching, protecting, guiding. And a small, dangerous hope began to grow inside me, that maybe, just maybe, someone like Gabriel could change my life. Weeks passed. I hadn't called him. I didn't know why, but I felt like calling might be stepping off a cliff without knowing what waited below. Yet, every time the city pressed down on me, every time I struggled with bills or tiredness or fear, his image came to me like a beacon. Then one evening as I returned from the market, Tund clinging to my hip, there he was, standing at my doorstep, tall, composed, drenched from the rain, and smiling as if he had always belonged there. "Hello," he said simply. No introduction. No apology for appearing unannounced. Just, "Hello." My heart thudded in my chest. "Gabriel. I thought I'd check on you," he said, voice calm, almost casual. "Make sure you and Tund are safe." I wanted to ask how he knew where I lived. I wanted to tell him he couldn't just appear in my life like this. But all I did was nod, and he smiled, as if reading the hesitation on my face. That night, over tea, I learned that he was not just a man of wealth but of influence, of connections, of power I had never encountered before. He spoke gently, yet his words had weight. He asked about Tund, about my life, about the struggles I carried like invisible chains. And I found myself talking. Really talking. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small, invisible, or alone. He listened, genuinely. And when he offered help, an unexpected sum for Tund's school fees, a suggestion for work that could fit my skills, a promise of guidance, I hesitated. Not because I didn't want it, but because I knew nothing in this world came free. Not really. Yet something in his eyes, something in the way he looked at me and my son, made me want to believe. Made me want to take the chance. And so, I did. I allowed him into our home, just for a short while at first. A cup of tea, a shared meal, a conversation that lasted long into the night. I watched him as he laughed, as he smiled at Tund, as he seemed to care. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe that in a city that devoured the weak, someone could still be kind, someone could still be genuine. But deep down, a tiny, insistent voice whispered, "Be careful." Because I had a feeling that meeting Gabriel wasn't the end of this story. It was only the beginning. After that first evening, Gabriel became persistent. Not intrusive, not aggressively so, but present enough that I felt him in the spaces of my life I thought were untouchable. At first, it was small things. A bouquet of lilies left on our doorstep, a bag of groceries bigger than I could ever afford, a little note tucked in Tund's lunchbox, wishing him luck in school. I tried to rationalize it. He was wealthy. He had the means. Maybe he just liked helping people. Maybe he was a philanthropist at heart. And yet, something in the way he did it, the care, the attention, the subtle, deliberate timing, kept me on edge. It started with my mornings. I would wake up to see his messages on my phone, short, polite, yet intimate enough to make me pause. "How did you sleep?" one read. Another, "Tons homework. Does he need help?" I told myself it was harmless. But the way I noticed him lingering in my thoughts, that was something I couldn't explain. And then he started appearing in places I didn't expect. At the market, where I bargained for tomatoes and yams. At the school gates, where Tund waited for me, backpack slung over his tiny shoulders. Always polite. Always unobtrusive. Always watching. I should have been wary. But the truth? I felt a strange relief when he was there. Like a shield against the chaos of Lagos, against the judgmental glances, against the weight of being alone. One evening, he invited me to dinner. Not at a fancy restaurant. At first, I was nervous he would whisk me away to some exclusive world I could not navigate, but at a small, charming restaurant by the marina. Candles flickered on every table. The sound of water lapping against the docks filled the silence between us. "I wanted to show you a different side of Lagos," he said, his voice low, warm. "A side you deserve to see." I felt my heart flutter. This wasn't just generosity. This was calculated charm. But it felt good, intoxicating even, to be seen in such a way. Over the course of dinner, he listened. Really listened. He asked about Tun's school, my family, the small dreams I had tucked away like fragile paper boats in a storm. And then, subtly, he offered solutions. "I have friends in the publishing industry," he said. "I could help get your writing into print." A notebook I hadn't touched in years, filled with stories and poems I wrote for Tund, suddenly seemed like it might have value. "You don't have to accept," he said gently, reading my hesitation. "I only want to help if you're ready." It wasn't the offer that unsettled me. It was the way he made me feel obligated without demanding anything. The way his presence made me question what I could achieve alone, and whether I even wanted to anymore. Weeks turned into months. Gabriel became a part of our routine. He picked up Tund from school sometimes, leaving him small gifts that made the boy's eyes shine. He helped pay bills that I had been struggling to cover for months. He invited me to events where I met people I never would have imagined speaking to. And each time, he was charming, attentive, deliberate. But it wasn't all kindness. The first time I noticed the manipulation, it was subtle, almost imperceptible. "Your electricity bill is overdue," he said one evening as we sat in my modest living room. Rain pattered against the window. Tund was asleep, exhausted from school. "I can help cover it. But I like to know the people I help." "You understand." I nodded, a little too quickly. I didn't like the way the words sounded, as if he held something over me already, as if he was creating a debt beyond money. Then came the personal favors. Small things at first. "Could you email me your work schedule?" he asked one evening. "I just like to know your routine. Helps me plan visits." I hesitated. My instinct screamed no, but I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe his interest was genuine. I told myself it was harmless. The first real test came one Saturday. Gabriel had invited us to his apartment. An apartment I could never afford to dream of, with floor-to-ceiling windows, polished marble floors, and a view of the city that took my breath away. "Tund, go play with the other children," he said, smiling down at my son. The boy ran off, laughing, and I turned back to him, uncertain. "I wanted you to feel comfortable," he said. His tone was casual, but his eyes, they were sharp. Watching, studying, gauging. He gestured to a couch. "Sit. Tell me about yourself, about your plans." I talked. About my struggles. About Tund. About dreams I didn't dare say out loud. And all the while, he listened. Nodded. Leaned forward when appropriate. Smiled at the right moments. And I realized, as he poured us tea, that every word I spoke was being carefully noted. Every hesitation, every flicker of fear or desire, every small confession, catalogued. Then he leaned closer. Not aggressively, not threateningly, but close enough that I could smell the faint scent of expensive cologne, feel the warmth radiating from him. "You're stronger than you know," he murmured. His hand brushed mine as he passed me the cup. Just a fleeting touch, and yet electric. My pulse stuttered. "But you shouldn't have to be strong alone." I looked at him, heart hammering, mind racing. And for the first time, I wondered if I wanted to be alone. Or if I wanted him here, in my life, even if the consequences were unclear. Over time, the favors escalated. Financial support. Opportunities for work. Invitations to social circles I couldn't otherwise enter. Every act was wrapped in charm, subtle seduction, and a careful measure of obligation. I began to feel dependent, not on the money itself, but on the presence, the attention, the reassurance. I started to notice the patterns. Questions that seemed casual. "Do you ever feel lonely at night?" "Who else knows about your finances?" "How often do you meet people from work?" Small nudges, small manipulations, designed to make me answer, to open up, to trust. And yet, I couldn't stop myself. The relief, the comfort, the sense that someone, finally, was protecting me and my son, was intoxicating. It dulled the warning bells ringing faintly in my mind. Then came the night that truly unsettled me. We had just returned from a gala he insisted I attend. I felt out of place among the glittering women and polished men, my dress borrowed from a friend, shoes scuffed from walking through Lagos streets. Gabriel had been perfect, guiding me, introducing me, praising me at all the right moments. Back in my apartment, I sank onto the sofa, exhausted. He handed me a glass of wine, his fingers brushing mine again, deliberate, controlled. "You did wonderfully tonight," he said. "More than I could have hoped." The praise should have comforted me, and in part it did. But then he leaned closer, his knee brushing mine under the small coffee table. "I like being near you," he said softly. "You make me feel alive." I felt a shiver, a mix of fear and desire, confusion and awareness. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to tell him to leave. But I couldn't. I wanted to believe in him, in his words, in the illusion that he could be trusted. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Tun's soft breathing from his room. Gabriel's presence lingered in my mind, like a shadow that was at once comforting and terrifying. I realized then that I was trapped, not by bars, not by force, but by something subtler, more dangerous. The promise of safety, of stability, of hope I had long abandoned. I tried to shake the feeling, tried to convince myself I could remain cautious. But each act of generosity, each subtle touch, each whispered word in the night, drew me deeper into his orbit. And I knew in the quiet of the night, that I would have to be careful. That this man, this mysterious billionaire, had intentions I could not yet see. That everything he offered, every favor, every smile, might have strings. And yet, even knowing this, part of me wanted to stay. I should have seen it coming. Every favor, every touch, every word of praise was a step toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. I had allowed Gabriel into our lives so completely that the line between gratitude and obligation had blurred, leaving me vulnerable in ways I could no longer deny. It started with the small things. Late-night messages asking about bills, casual inquiries about where I went, questions about Tun's school friends that seemed innocent but made me stiffen. I brushed them off at first, convincing myself I was overthinking. But the nagging sense of unease refused to leave. Something in the way he watched me, the way he smiled when I stumbled over a sentence, the way he leaned just slightly too close, whispered that everything he did was calculated. Then came the confrontation I had been dreading. It was a rainy evening, the kind where Lagos seemed to hold its breath, streets glistening under streetlights, puddles reflecting the amber glow like molten gold. Tund was asleep, exhausted from school and homework, and I was folding laundry in the living room when I heard the faintest shuffle behind me. Gabriel, I said, not turning around. My voice was steady, but my chest tightened. I thought we should talk, he said, sitting on the edge of the sofa. His damp coat hung from his shoulders, droplets sliding onto the marble floor. He didn't ask permission, didn't offer a greeting. He just was there, watching. I turned slowly, trying to mask my fear. Talk about what? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. You know what I mean, he said softly. The debts you owe. The favors you've accepted. The trust you've given me so freely. My stomach lurched. Debts? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Gabriel, I don't owe you anything. He held up a hand, stopping me. Not in the way you think. Not in money. In choices. In influence. In power. You've allowed me into your life, and with that, you've allowed me to shape it. I felt the walls of my small apartment close in. The generosity, the attention, the comfort he had offered. It had all been a trap. A carefully constructed web designed to ensnare me. What do you want? I whispered, my voice shaking. Just this, he said, his eyes darkening. I want to know that I can rely on you. That you'll make the choices I prefer. That your decisions, your life, your child's future, are aligned with my interests. I staggered back, heart pounding. You can't. Tund, my son, he's not. I won't. His smile was slow, deliberate, almost gentle, but there was steel beneath it. I can take everything, you know. Your house. Your savings. Even Tund. All I need is a single misstep. I froze. The words didn't just terrify me, they ignited a spark of fury. For months, I had allowed him to manipulate us, to wrap me in his golden cage. And now he thought he could control the outcome entirely? Not if I could help it. You've been manipulating me this entire time, I said, voice breaking but firm. Every favor, every touch, every word, it wasn't kindness. It was a strategy. He leaned back, calm as ever. You give me too little credit. It was both. I do admire you. I do care. But I also plan carefully. You should know that about people like me. I wanted to run, to scream, to throw him out of my apartment and never look back. But I couldn't. He had woven himself into the fabric of our lives so completely that leaving without a plan would be disastrous. Tun's future, our safety, depended on my next move. I sat down across from him, mind racing. What happens if I don't comply? He shrugged. Then we lose each other. And you'll lose more than you realize. I swallowed hard, the enormity of his threat pressing down on me. He wasn't just dangerous. He was intelligent, meticulous, patient. And I had underestimated him because I wanted to believe in the good he promised. That night, I lay awake beside Tund, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing, the faint sounds of rain tapping against the window. I thought about all the moments I had allowed myself to be seduced by his charm. The dinners, the gifts, the whispered compliments. Each one was a thread in a tapestry designed to bind me. And yet, even as fear coursed through me, a small flame of defiance flickered. I would not let him take Tund. I would not let him dictate our lives. And I would not let myself be broken. The next morning, I began to act. Quietly, deliberately. I reviewed every interaction, every gift, every favor he had offered. I documented everything. Receipts, messages, photos, even the subtle details that hinted at his manipulations. It took hours, painstakingly cataloging every moment, but by noon, I had a dossier that could expose him. Or at least give me leverage. When he arrived that evening, I greeted him with a smile I didn't feel. Gabriel, I said, setting a cup of tea before him. We need to talk. He raised an eyebrow, sensing the shift. About what? About boundaries, I said firmly. About trust. About my son. His smile faltered, just slightly, but it was enough to give me courage. Go on, he said. I placed the dossier on the table between us. I know what you've been doing. The favors, the gifts, the attention, it wasn't kindness. It was manipulation. And I've documented everything. His eyes narrowed, a storm behind the calm facade. And what do you plan to do with that? Use it, I said. To protect my son. To protect myself. I will not let you control our lives. He leaned back, a slow, deliberate exhale. You are brave, he said softly. And foolish. I met his gaze, refusing to flinch. Maybe, I admitted. But I'd rather be foolish than a prisoner. For the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in him, a crack in the armor he wore so carefully. I seized it. You offered me safety, stability, a chance for Tun to have a life he deserves. I accepted because I trusted you. But trust is earned, not demanded. And you don't get to decide how I live, or how I raise my son. He was silent, calculating. Then he smiled, slow, dangerous. Very well. You've made your choice. I didn't wait for more. That night, I took Tund and we left, quietly, carefully, without fanfare. I had arranged for temporary housing, a friend who could keep us safe while I finalized the next steps. Gabriel's influence was vast, yes, but it was not absolute. And I had my wits, my determination, and the love for my child as weapons stronger than any money could buy. As we crossed the city under the cover of darkness, rain-soaked streets glistening like polished obsidian, I held Tund close. Mommy's going to fix everything, I whispered. He slept, unaware of the danger we had narrowly escaped, trusting me entirely. I knew the road ahead would be difficult. Exposing Gabriel could provoke consequences I couldn't predict. Legal battles, threats, even attempts to reclaim control. But I was no longer the widow who had stumbled into his world out of gratitude and fear. I was a mother determined to protect her child. A woman who had learned that generosity without transparency is a weapon. A woman who would fight, relentlessly, to keep her life, and Tund, her own. I didn't know how it would end. Maybe we would survive the storm, maybe not. But I did know one thing. I would not cower. I would not submit. And as long as I had breath in my body, I would ensure that. Tund's future was his own, untainted by the manipulations of a man who had once seemed like a savior but revealed himself as a predator in silk and smiles. For the first time in years, I felt free. And the freedom tasted bitter and sweet all at once.